the way that we can better live our life is reflecting on death and having conversations about death. And most of us are so scared to talk or to plan in this area that we put it off, and that presents a lot of challenges. And when a loved one close to us passes away and we don't know how they wanted us to remember them and they don't know what their wishes are, it
Mhm.
really creates a lot of turmoil.
This is the Buried in Work podcast, where we share tips and interview experts to help you simplify estate planning and end-of-life tasks.
Welcome to the Buried in Work podcast, where we feature tips and stories from industry professionals who specialize in making estate planning, end-of-life tasks, and estate transitions more manageable. I'm your host, Adam Zuckerman, and today we have a very special guest. That's Steve Gurney. Now, Steve is the founder of Positive Aging Community and has been a trailblazer in the field of senior living and aging resources for more than 3 decades. He started with the Retirement Living Sourcebook in 1990. He has dedicated his career to helping families and professionals navigate the complexities of aging. Today, we're going to dive into his journey, the evolution of positive aging, and his insights on innovative marketing strategies in the senior living industry. Welcome, Steve.
Great to be here, Adam.
I appreciate you taking the time. Let's hop in. So, personal journey. Share a bit about your story of how you first got involved in the field of aging and senior living and what inspired you to ultimately create the Retirement Living Sourcebook.
Yeah, well, like a lot of people in this field, I kind of stumbled into this by accident. When I was in college, my grandfather needed a nursing home, and while I didn't participate in that decision making, I observed what my family had to go through to make that difficult decision and to assist my grandfather. And then when I graduated from college, I didn't have the greatest job in the world. And I figured, why don't I put together a little resource guide that might help families like mine? I can put it on my resume and maybe I'll get a better job or get into grad school. And much to my surprise, people really loved it. And so here I am, still publish it. It's called Positive Aging Sourcebook, almost 35 years later. And I couldn't have asked for a better career. And there's just so much opportunity and innovation that we can create to support families and individuals in their journey.
Uh, Talk about the evolution of the company itself. So you owned it, it went to Washington Post, it's now back under you. That's a really interesting story that
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of people are familiar with.
Yeah. So I started this thing. And again, I didn't even think I was starting a business. I was just like wanted something on my resume. And then all of a sudden, I'm in this world of publishing, and I was just chugging along and developing partnerships with lots of organizations in this aging space, and really trying to bring together, and this is pre-internet, bring together a resource that was credible, that you could understand the complexities of, whether it be choosing an assisted living or buying long-term care insurance, just objectively putting it together. And I was working my way up the East Coast, DC, where I'm based out of, Baltimore, Philadelphia. And then in 1998, I had the Washington Post and several other organizations saw what I was doing. And I sort of realized I was at a crossroads. I was either going to continue on my own in this basement and have potentially a big competitor that I was dealing with, that I wasn't currently dealing with at that point, or maybe I would sell or partner. And I really got along with the folks at the Washington Post. We had a wholly owned subsidiary that did New Homes Guide, Apartment Showcase, and then the Guide to Retirement Living is what it was called at that time. And like all entrepreneurs that sell their business, I figured, okay, I'll be able to do 3 years and then I'll be off doing something else. But I ended up staying there for 20 years. And I would say a lot of it has to do with the fact that it was a great organization. They gave us a lot of autonomy. And then nobody knew anything about what I was doing. And that really benefited me. Nobody could give me advice on anything. So it was a good journey.
Who approached to at that point? Were you the one to recognize, hey, I need to actually change and exit or partner with someone bigger, but for the competition that could spin up, maybe even them? Or did they recognize that you were a potential partner and start the conversation?
Yeah, it was one of those things. The organizations that reached out to me, they saw opportunity in the senior living space, and they were all in some form of media, and it was sort of like, hey, here's an additional area. It was, again, total by accident, but also I tell entrepreneurs it's a lot better when people are looking for you than when you're out there, "Hey, my business is for sale," or "I'm looking for a partner." And so I didn't script it out that way, but it worked out well because it was that way.
So you were there for 20 some odd years. You decided, hey, it's time for a little bit of change. How did you pull everything back out under your own umbrella again?
That was, again, one of these things what ended up happening, and I know this is a little bit inside baseball, but as I'd mentioned, our organization had a lot of autonomy to the Washington Post, and then our lease for our office was up, and so we made the transition to be a part of the newspaper. And obviously a small business unit like mine in a massive internationally renowned media operation like the Washington Post is sort of like a square peg in a round hole to the extent. They were wonderful, but I sort of saw the writing on the wall. It might have happened, 5 years from then, but I sort of realized there wasn't an ideal match. My employees didn't really like the transition, and for the most part, they found new places to go. And and so I just kind of engaged the discussion that I might be leaving, and that sort of led to a discussion on might be hard for us to run this without you. And so I got it back.
Okay, so you got it back. You've been around for 3 decades now, focusing on positive aging, helping individuals navigate that journey. What are some of the most significant challenges that you've seen people face, and how have those challenges evolved over time?
Man, I love talking about this stuff because it's really fascinating and there's so much for people to learn and explore, and everybody's journey is a little bit different. But that being said, let me talk about sort of three main things that I see people talking about, and maybe we can have a little conversation about some solutions. So the first is solo aging. And I had never even heard this term before, but on one of our online discussions, a couple of people started referring to themselves as solo agers. And so then I started doing more content and discussions around this topic of solo aging. And I realized that there are so many people out there that identify as solo agers in that they don't necessarily have somebody, they don't feel like if something happened that they had somebody that could look out for them and help them with decision making or provide assistance. And the topic of solo aging has just been fascinating to me.
Mhm. What's number two?
Number two is what to do with our stuff. Okay. Again, over the years, I've been involved in a lot of discussions and events on about moving and downsizing. But if somebody doesn't want to move or downsize, they're not going to go to a discussion. They're not going to talk about that. They're like, oh, I'm fine, but when you bring up the topic of what to do with our stuff, all of us have stuff. And even if we're not pack rats, it could be organizing our photos, it could be collectibles, train sets, things of that nature. And there's lots of little rabbit holes that you can go down when we're talking about what to do with our stuff. One of the topics that I absolutely love is the topic of Swedish death cleaning. And what Swedish death cleaning says is that, hey, we've got all these possessions. Let's find out who can enjoy them now while we're living so that our loved ones aren't sort of going through boxes trying to figure out where this stuff should go when we're dead. And it's a Swedish practice, and it's pretty interesting, the different approaches. Some people have parties where people come over and they basically say, hey, take all my stuff. I want to see people enjoy it now while I'm living. So, what to do with our stuff is one that is on the top of people's minds.
Maybe we can approach IKEA and have a Dostadning section in IKEAs from now on. Instead of buying the stuff, let's figure out how we can help you simplify.
Oh, God. And you just look around the world at all of these storage units that are basically where people just cram things into a storage unit. I mean, I get if you're a State Department employee and you're overseas, but most storage units are basically people just putting things in that they can't get rid of for emotional reasons, usually.
I wonder if there's going to be a boom in storage units as the next several decades pass. I mean, 10,000 Americans are turning 65 every day. The boomers are transitioning a heck of a lot of physical property,
Yep.
and the generations coming up, quite frankly, oftentimes don't have the resources to purchase new houses. Where are they going to put all the stuff?
No. Well, I'll tell you, I'm in Northern Virginia, and there's two things that I see going up more than anything, and that's data centers and storage units. They're on the sides of all highways. It's a big problem.
Agreed. And at Buried in Work, people are coming to us for estate sale help and a whole host of other challenges about that. How do I downsize? When do I downsize? And it's good to hear that you guys are certainly on the right track of helping to steer them in the right direction.
Yep.
All right, what's the next trend?
Well, the next one that I actually never thought that I would say this, but it's talking about end of life decisions and having conversations around that. And like a lot of people, I was scared to talk about end of life and death. Even though I've been in this business for a while, whenever I would go to a seminar or have a conversation, I'd approach it with a little bit of hesitancy. But now that I've exercised that muscle hundreds of times and had hundreds of discussions on end of life topics, I have actually found that these are the most deep and meaningful conversations that I've had. And in fact, actually, the way that we can better live our life is reflecting on death and having conversations about death. And most of us are so scared to talk or to plan in this area that we put it off, and that presents a lot of challenges. And when a loved one close to us passes away and we don't know how they wanted us to remember them and they don't know what their wishes are, it
Mhm.
really creates a lot of turmoil. Now, I'll share with you just one recent thing that I did that I was absolutely amazing is there's this book, Let's Talk About Death Over Dinner. And I was going to be interviewing the author of this book. And so I said, in preparation for this, I'm going to host a Let's Talk About Death Over dinner party. And you know, it was my wife, my brother, and his wife, and I followed the steps exactly because I wanted to talk to this author about this experience. Here I am having dinner with three people that I know extremely well, but I can tell you when we sort of made the focus of our talk to remember our ancestors, to think about how we all wanted to be remembered, to talk about how we envisioned our own death. All four of us were like, wow, we've known each other for years very intimately, but we've never had these conversations. And it wasn't negative at all. It wasn't morbid. In fact, it was more positive than anything. The first question that they recommend is talk about some of your loved ones that aren't with us anymore. And that was just a great way to kick off a wonderful dinner party.
I love it. And it's so similar to what we're doing with the One More Story card game, with the Nothing Left Unsaid card game. We're actually working on something else that's very similar in concept, but a little bit different, that maybe we can talk about another time. The interesting thing about what you guys are doing is that you're not just working directly with consumers that are seeking help, but you're doing so much more than that to foster community in the space. Talk about some of the stuff that you're doing there and what's actually surprised you that wasn't necessarily obvious when you started.
When I did start, the first thing that kind of hit me like a Mack truck in the face was that in general, the consumer is nervous and doesn't want to talk about these aging related topics. And so the phrase that I hear more than any other phrase out there is, oh, that's all good. And I know it's important, but I'm not ready for that yet. And whether it be talking about end of life or, planning for senior living or, putting grab bars in your bathroom, most people don't want to talk about it. Yet there's this group of professionals out there that seem to be talking to all the people that, for one reason or another, had to make a decision and had to stop saying, I'm not ready yet. And that could be, an elder law attorney. It could be a financial planner. It could be somebody who works in a government agency. And so one of the things I did early on was build that community of these influential providers because they provide easier access to the end consumer. But the thing that I really love about where we are now with the positive aging community is we have these periodic discussions on a variety of topics, and our attendee group is representing older adults who are open-minded enough to planning ahead and talking about things, their family members who might be assisting a loved one who either can't or is hesitant to think about this, and then this group of professionals. And it's really exciting to me when you can bring all three of these groups together in one room, whether it be in person or virtual, because you've got all these different points of view and everyone is viewed as equal. I know I'm babbling here, but that's a couple of insights in terms of this community that we're fostering.
It's helpful though, and to give context. So you've got the source book itself, which is a physical product. You have the online website that is a content repository that's interactive. You can search listings, a whole host of other information, topic based, and you also have your in-person events. Describe a little bit about the role in your ecosystem for each of those and how it's helping people.
The printed publication, the source book, the first thing that I started with, although we've migrated to a world where we've all sort of got this vision that anything printed or on paper is irrelevant or will become irrelevant in short form. We've been talking about that for several decades, and there still is value in, something in print that you can kind of scroll down a page and look at information or pass it around the living room to your siblings and pass that out. And the other thing that I've discovered is that by having a print product out there, the majority of our relevant website traffic comes from that print publication because for the last since 1995, I've had our website on the bottom of each of those pages. So
Mhm.
so over the years, it definitely drives to the online world where we have very similar content. But the real thing that has changed our online content, and the thing that I really feel like makes us a community, are the live and interactive discussions that we have each week on our online platform. And this is where folks can come in. It's a safe space. We can talk about a topic. If they've got questions on that topic, they can answer it. They can get it answered, or they can hear a conversation without feeling like somebody is going to sell them something. And that's been really exciting to me.
Do the majority of the in-person events, are they targeting potential individuals like my mom or my aunt or myself, or is it more for industry professionals?
Yeah, okay, and I apologize. We have online events, and our online events are live and interactive, and they're on Zoom and streaming platforms. And those events are usually very equal cross section of consumers. Half of the audience is consumers, half is professionals. Now, we do and I've done in-person events, for the last 25 years, and the in-person events that I'm involved with are more targeted to the professionals, the professional community. But one of my pet peeves is to integrate as many real life stories into these professional events as I possibly can. And from time to time, we will have somebody like your aunt show up at one of these events because they heard about it or what have you. And they often say to me, it's like, wow, this is the best thing I've ever been to. I was looking for information on elder care, and I'm here in a room with 100 people that provide all these different services. Now, this is kind of like another one of my pet peeves is that most of the time, if a consumer, somebody like your aunt,
Hmm.
wanted to interact with professionals in this field, they'd go to one of these quote unquote senior expos, okay?
Hmm.
And it's almost like trick or treating. The providers are in a room, they have all got tables, and the professionals are on one side and the consumers are on the other, and they kind of march around. But that is not putting people on an equal footing. It can be very intimidating. And I'm really into the fact that I like an ecosystem where the consumers and the professionals can have free conversations and not feel like you're sort of obligated to sign up or take a pen off somebody's table.
Absolutely, and nobody needs more of those,
Yeah.
squishy balls on the desk or post-it
Yeah.
notes with a logo on top. You've been around the block. You've seen things evolve. I mean, quite frankly, over 30 years, that's the evolution of the internet in many ways. It's gone from analog to digital, and you continue to stay relevant. How do you do that? How are you maintaining relevancy as the trends in the senior living industry change, the technology in senior living industry changes? What's your trick?
Well, thank you for that compliment, but I think like every entrepreneur out there, I'm always worried that I'm not relevant. And I think to answer your question, how do I stay relevant? It's a sort of a paranoia that I've got to do more. I've got to be better, that I think keeps me constantly pushing, keeps me navigating my world with a wide field of vision, hoping that I'm going to trip over a better way to communicate, a better way to help people make connections and things like that. But we did our first website in 1995. And I remember that I forgot the guy's name. He was out in Washington State, but he got seniors.com. He got the website seniors.com. And I was like, oh,
Oof.
holy cow. Well, the game over. He's going to own the internet because he got seniors.com. And if we all look back at that era of AOL and seniors.com, we've got to all constantly just be feeling that we're not doing well enough and constantly pushing ourselves. And I guess that's it. I don't feel like I'm relevant, but I realize that I'm doing some things that are helping people, but I know I can do more.
I think you can definitely do more, but the fact of the matter is, up and down the East Coast, your community is very well respected, and it's nice to see that you've remained humble with all the success. What is your vision for the future of positive aging, and can you even share it? Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely. I think that number one, I hope I trip over something today or tomorrow that is kind of the next way to sort of move this community to another level. But I guess the thing that I really like, it's interesting, like what I want to see in the future is number one, a world without ageism. I mean, I want to see and hear us when we're looking in the mirror that we're not saying, oh gosh, look at that gray hair, or I'm not as good as I used to be when I was younger. But a whole different attitude on these chapters in life that we call aging. And I feel like that my platform, while we're helping people come up with solutions, many times these are crisis-based solutions. I'm hoping that the language that we're using, the way that we're communicating, the community that we're bringing together to have meaningful conversations, that it sort of helps advance a better dialogue about this chapter of life that we call aging. And we have higher regard for it in our society.
I think that's brilliant. All right, two more questions for you. Advice for families. You've gone through it, you've helped people go through it. You're an expert that's constantly innovating in that regard.
Yeah.
What advice do you have to give to families and individuals that are just starting off in this process?
Yeah, the key thing is communication, and that is, for a lot of the topics that you're talking about related to estate planning and documentation, like I feel like the public, we know that we've got to have a will, we've got to get these legal documents in order. But the important thing that I see is that it's having a conversation. And I know this probably flies in the opposition to estate planning principles, but if you could, I have a choice of two things: proper paperwork or proper conversations with the people around you on how you want to live your life. I would take the conversation any day of the week, because once you have the conversation, it's going to make that paperwork easier. And
Mhm.
then the other thing is, there's so many people that are doing this estate planning documentation, but they're not having a conversation. And their loved ones are reading their wishes for the first time when they passed away, as opposed to having that conversation. So having the conversation is great because it also enables you to have real conversations about what you find important about living and things like that. I feel like a lot of the calls that I get are, mom told me that she's never going to leave the home and she doesn't want to move to assisted living or what have you. And I realized that that wasn't a conversation. That was mom just telling you something and not saying, well, is there a point in time, like if you were diagnosed with dementia and it would be safer for you to live somewhere else, and having a dialogue about that.
All right. Steve, if people want to find you, how do they do that?
Proaging.com, that's the best way. And you should be able to click around and find me or find the things that we were just talked about on that website.
All right, Steve, thank you so much for your time today. We enjoyed the conversation, and that wraps up another Buried in Work podcast episode where we feature tips and stories from industry professionals who specialize in making estate planning, end-of-life tasks, and estate transitions more manageable. If you enjoyed the podcast, as usual, please consider leaving us a review, following us on social media, or visiting us at our website, buriedinwork.com. Don't forget, podcast listeners can save 10% off Buried in Work's estate preparation package and our games with the code BIWPodcast. Steve, thanks again. It has been a pleasure.
Oh, you bet. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Buried in Work podcast. Remember, you can save 10% on our estate preparation package and games with code podcast10 at buriedinwork.com.